You ever have one of those moments where it feels like your whole life is splintering apart, right before your eyes? Like the universe itself has teamed up to knock you flat. For me, that moment hit like a freight train as I glanced at her phone, casually charging on the kitchen counter. It buzzed once, the screen lighting up with a name I didn't recognize. Ryan. Normally, I'm not the type to snoop, but something about that moment felt different. A voice in my gut whispered, "No," demanded, "Check it." So I did. I wasn't ready for what I saw. The message read, "Last night was unforgettable. I can't stop thinking about you. Same time next week." My heart thundered in my chest, and everything around me seemed to slow down. The words blurred in front of me as I scrolled up, revealing a string of messages that unraveled the truth, piece by sordid piece. Descriptions of what she'd done. Promises for more. Words I never imagined could be tied to my wife, Emily. 7 years of marriage, and I thought I knew her better than I knew myself. I don't know how long I stood there, clutching her phone so tightly I half expected it to crack under my fingers. When I finally set it back down, my hands were trembling. That's when Emily walked into the room, her face lighting up with the smile I used to think was mine alone. "Hey, babe," she said cheerily, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I turned my head, avoiding her touch. She froze mid-step, the confusion spreading across her face. "What's wrong?" "You tell me," I replied, my voice steady, eerily calm given the storm raging inside me. Her smile faltered. "What do you mean? Who's Ryan?" I asked, each word precise, like a blade slicing through the tension. Her reaction was immediate, a sharp intake of breath, her eyes darting to the phone still on the counter. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but the crack in her voice gave her away. "I read the messages, Emily," I said, my tone leaving no room for doubt. "All of them." Her face drained of color, her eyes wide with horror. "No, wait. It's not, let me explain." "Explain." I laughed bitterly, the sound foreign to my own ears. "You think there's an explanation that makes this okay?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached out toward me, but I stepped back. "Please, Jake," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. Just one stupid night. It didn't mean anything." Something inside me broke, a tether I hadn't even realized was holding me together. "A mistake?" I repeated, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the air. "Didn't mean anything? That's your excuse after everything we've been through?" "I love you," she cried, desperation bleeding into her words. "You don't get to say that," I snapped, my anger finally spilling over. "Not anymore." Her tears fell freely now, and for a moment, I felt the faintest flicker of pity. But then those messages flashed in my mind again, her words, vivid and damning, and any trace of sympathy was crushed under the weight of my anger. "I need some air," I muttered, grabbing my jacket and keys. "Please don't go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can fix this." I stopped at the doorway and turned to look at her one last time, burning the image of her face into my mind, the woman who'd shattered everything we had built. "You already broke it, Emily," I said, my voice cold. "And you don't get to decide how this ends." The night air was sharp and unforgiving as I stepped outside, my thoughts spinning in a chaotic loop. "This isn't over." The words echoed in my head like a promise. I drove aimlessly through the quiet suburban streets, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had no destination, no plan, just a desperate need to escape. How had it come to this? I'd given Emily everything, my love, my loyalty, my life. And with one reckless act, she'd thrown it all away. Eventually, I pulled into an empty lot, the car shrouded in darkness. I sat there, staring at the night sky, the cold seeping into my bones. I didn't care. My mind churned with questions and doubts, but above all, a seething fury that refused to die down. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Then it hit me, like a lightning bolt jolting me awake. If Emily thought I was the kind of man who'd just roll over and let this slide, she clearly didn't know me at all. No, this wasn't going to end with empty apologies or hollow promises of change. It wouldn't end with me playing the fool. I was going to make sure she regretted every choice that led us here. The next morning, I stepped back into the house, wearing the mask of a man willing to reconcile. Emily was on the couch, her face pale and blotchy from a night of crying. Her eyes darted up to meet mine, filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Jake," she started, her voice trembling as if testing the waters. I raised a hand to cut her off. "I've been thinking," I said, keeping my tone calm and deliberate. Her eyes widened, clinging to the glimmer of hope in my words. She nodded quickly, desperate to believe I might forgive her. "I'll give you one chance," I continued, the weight of my voice making her sit up straighter. "But you have to be completely honest. No more lies. If I even sense you're holding back," I let the unfinished sentence hang in the air, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. "I will," she blurted out, her voice breaking as tears filled her eyes. "I'll tell you everything. Just, please, don't leave me." I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep the disgust from creeping into my expression. "Start from the beginning," I demanded. "How did this happen?" She hesitated, her gaze falling to the floor. "It was a mistake," she murmured, barely audible. "Ryan, he's a coworker. We went out for drinks after work, and one thing led to another. I didn't mean for it to happen, Jake. I swear." I studied her face, searching for cracks in her performance. She looked genuinely remorseful, but the memory of that text message, the vivid details of her betrayal, burned in my mind like a brand. "Did it only happen once?" I pressed, my voice low but firm. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Liar." I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her answer. "Okay," I said. "We'll see if you're worth forgiving." While Emily spent the day nervously trying to dote on me, I got to work. I reached out to Daniel, an old friend who ran a private investigation firm. "Daniel, I need a favor," I said, keeping my voice quiet. "Jake? What's going on?" "It's personal," I replied. "I think Emily's hiding more than she's letting on. Can you help me get to the bottom of it?" There was a pause before he let out a heavy sigh. "Yeah, I've got you. Send me her details, and I'll start digging." "Thanks, Daniel," I said, relief washing over me. With that handled, I started crafting my plan. Emily believed she was being given a second chance, but all I was doing was buying time, collecting evidence and laying the groundwork for my next move. That evening, I surprised her with dinner at one of her favorite restaurants. The way her eyes lit up, you'd think she'd been handed a lifeline. She clung to me all night, laughing at my jokes and sneaking stolen glances like she was trying to etch my face into her memory. As we drove home, she asked cautiously, "Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm trying," I replied, forcing a faint smile. "For us." Her hand found mine, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you, Jake. I promise I'll make this right." The rest of the week became a carefully orchestrated performance. I played the role of the forgiving husband while tracking her movements and monitoring her calls. Meanwhile, Daniel was delivering results, photos, text logs, and enough evidence to obliterate any shred of doubt I might have had. It wasn't just Ryan. There was another man. A second affair. She'd been meeting him for months, romantic dinners, late-night trysts, an entire labyrinth of lies so meticulously crafted it was almost impressive. By the time Daniel was done, I had a folder thick with damning evidence, enough to crush any defense she might try to make. The night before I set my plan in motion, Emily climbed into bed beside me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "I love you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you for giving me another chance. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Because tomorrow, the world she thought she'd repaired was going to come crashing down. The morning of reckoning arrived, and with it came an unexpected sense of calm. Emily moved about the house with a quiet optimism, humming softly as she flipped pancakes in the kitchen. She looked so normal. So unaffected. Watching her carry on as if everything was fine only stoked the fire simmering in my chest. If she only knew what was coming. I had spent the entire night fine-tuning my plan. Confronting her and walking away wasn't enough, not for this. I didn't just want her to feel guilty, I wanted to tear down the fantasy world she'd crafted with her lies. By the end of the day, Emily would understand what real betrayal felt like. The first step began with the car. Thanks to Daniel's surveillance, I knew she'd used our vehicle for her little rendezvous, driving to meet her lovers, defiling places we'd once visited together as a couple. That morning, I borrowed her keys under the pretense of running an errand. Instead, I drove straight to the dealership and traded the car in for a modest cash payout. Divorce? The salesman asked, giving me a knowing, sympathetic look. Something like that, I said, signing the last document. Before leaving, I made sure to erase all traces of our account information from their system. By the time Emily realized what I'd done, it would be too late. With the money deposited into an account she didn't know existed, I hailed an Uber and headed home. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Next, I made my way to the storage unit we'd rented years ago. Originally, it had been for old furniture and sentimental keepsakes, but Emily had turned it into her personal space, for her hobbies and, as I'd now learned, for hiding pieces of her double life. Armed with a crowbar, I pried open the locked trunk she kept there. What I found turned my stomach. Inside were photo albums, trinkets, and a stash of letters, messages exchanged with her lovers. Some were sickeningly sweet, others explicit, but all of them painted a picture of just how far her betrayal had gone. I didn't cry. That part of me had burned out long ago. Instead, I packed everything into a box and drove straight to Daniel's office. He assured me the evidence would be safe, ready for the storm that was about to hit. By mid-afternoon, it was time to put the final pieces in place. I met with my lawyer, Rebecca, who had been preparing the divorce papers and custody arrangements for weeks. "You're sure you want to go through with this today?" she asked, sliding the documents across her desk. "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. Rebecca nodded, her expression resolute. "With the evidence you've provided, this case is as solid as it gets. Custody should go in your favor, and her financial claims will be minimal." "Good," I said. "Make sure the papers are served at the house this evening." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "While you're there?" "While she's there," I corrected. "I want her to feel the weight of it." When I got home, Emily greeted me with a tentative smile. She was dressed casually, her hair tied back, looking every bit the picture of a devoted wife. "Hey, babe," she said, stepping toward me to plant a kiss on my cheek. I turned away, dodging her lips. "Not now," I muttered, brushing past her into the living room. Her smile faltered, but she didn't push. Instead, she followed me and perched on the edge of the couch, watching me with nervous eyes. "I was thinking we could have dinner at that Italian place you love," she offered, her voice strained with forced cheerfulness. "I'm not hungry," I replied curtly, my tone leaving no room for discussion. The silence between us thickened, heavy and suffocating. Emily fidgeted with her wedding ring, twisting it absent-mindedly, a nervous habit I'd picked up on years ago. "Jake, is something wrong?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Emily started to stand, but I stopped her with a firm hand. "Sit down." Her eyes widened in confusion. "What? Why?" "Just sit," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. I crossed the room, opened the door, and found a courier standing there with an envelope in hand. Jacob Harris?" he asked. I nodded, taking the envelope from the courier and tipping him before closing the door. Emily watched me from the couch, her confusion quickly shifting to panic as I approached, the envelope clutched in my hand. "What's going on?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Without a word, I tossed the envelope onto the coffee table in front of her. "Open it," I said, my tone leaving no room for debate. Her hands trembled as she tore the seal open. The moment her eyes scanned the first line, all the color drained from her face. "Divorce?" she choked out, her voice breaking. I leaned forward, fixing her with a cold, unflinching stare. "I know everything, Emily. Every lie. Every betrayal. You didn't just cheat on me, you destroyed everything we built together." Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to find her words. "Jake, please. I can explain." "No," I interrupted, my voice sharp and ice-cold. "I'm done listening to you. This is your consequence." Her sobs filled the room as I rose from my seat and walked toward the door. I paused only for a moment to deliver the final blow. "Oh, and Emily," I said, turning slightly. "You might want to check the garage." Without waiting for her reaction, I stepped outside, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and grim satisfaction. She thought she could bury her sins forever, but now her carefully crafted lies were crumbling. And I wasn't done yet. As I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, the image of Emily's tear-streaked face burned in my mind. A small part of me felt vindicated, but most of me felt empty, hollow in a way that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't over. Not yet. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. Daniel's name lit up the screen. "Got a moment?" he asked, his tone serious. "Yeah," I replied, pulling into an empty parking lot. "What's up?" "Something came up during my surveillance," Daniel said, his voice low and deliberate. "You're going to want to hear this." "What is it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Ryan isn't just some random coworker," Daniel began. "He's been in your life a lot longer than you think." I frowned, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "What are you talking about?" Daniel hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Do you remember your college roommate? The one you always said was like a brother to you?" My chest tightened. "You're telling me Ryan is—" "His real name is Eric," Daniel interrupted. "Eric Daniels." It felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Eric and I had been inseparable in college, closer than family. Then, one summer, he vanished without a word. No phone calls, no emails, no explanation. I'd assumed life had pulled him in a different direction, as it often does after graduation. And now I trailed off, struggling to finish the thought. "Sleeping with your wife," Daniel said bluntly, his tone heavy. The revelation hit me like a truck. Emily's betrayal had already cut deep, but this? This was something else entirely. My anger reignited, sharper and more potent than before. This wasn't just a cheating spouse. This was a betrayal by someone I had once considered family. Without thinking, I called Emily. She answered on the first ring, her voice shaky and pleading. "Jake. Please, I need to talk to you. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. Can we just—" "Shut up," I snapped, cutting her off. "I don't want your apologies. I want answers." "About what?" she asked, her voice trembling. "About Ryan," I spat, the name leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Or should I say Eric Daniels? The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, I heard her sharp intake of breath. "You knew?" I accused. I didn't think you'd find out," she stammered, her voice cracking. "Did you think I'd just let it go?" I barked. "You thought you could sleep with someone who was practically my brother and I'd never notice?" "It's not what you think," she cried, desperation lacing her words. He reached out to me first. He said he wanted to reconnect with you. But then we started talking and I. And you what? I demanded, cutting her off again. You thought it'd be better to let him into your bed instead of bringing him back into my life? It wasn't like that, she sobbed. It started out innocent, I swear. I didn't know how to tell you without making it weird. And then you let him destroy our marriage, I finished coldly. She fell silent, her muffled sobs the only sound on the other end. Where is he now? I asked, my voice like steel. I don't know, she stammered. Liar, I hissed, the venom in my words unmistakable. You have one chance to tell me the truth, Emily. Where is he? She broke down completely, the dam of her composure finally giving way. He's staying at the Mason Inn, she confessed through sobs. Room 213. Please, Jake, don't do anything stupid. Oh, don't worry, I replied coldly. I'm not the one who made stupid choices. Then I hung up. The Mason Inn was a nondescript building tucked between a couple of office complexes, the kind of place where business travelers stayed for convenience, not comfort. Adrenaline coursed through me as I strode through the lobby and made my way to room 213. I didn't bother knocking. I didn't even hesitate. I kicked the door open. Eric was sitting on the edge of the bed, shirtless, his face frozen in a mask of shock as I stepped inside. A half-empty bottle of whiskey rested on the nightstand, and the entire room reeked of betrayal. Jake, he stammered, standing up slowly. I didn't let him get another word out. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling back onto the bed. You thought you could do this to me? I roared, grabbing him by the collar and hauling him to his feet. You thought I wouldn't find out? Wait, he sputtered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Like what? I spat, my rage burning through every syllable. You slink back into my life, seduce my wife, and destroy everything I've built. I didn't mean to hurt you, he pleaded, his voice shaking. Emily, she came on to me first. Don't you dare put this on her, I growled, slamming him against the wall. Own up to what you did. It's the truth, he cried, his voice desperate. I didn't plan this, Jake, I swear. She said you were distant, that you didn't love her anymore. I wanted to help. Help? I snarled, leaning closer. You've done enough damage. Here's what you're going to do, you're going to pack your things, leave this town, and never come near me or Emily again. If you so much as think about sticking around, I'll ruin you. Eric nodded frantically, his fear plain in his wide eyes. Okay, I'll go. I let go of his collar and stepped back. He slumped against the wall, trembling. This isn't over, I said coldly, turning to leave. Not even close. But as I drove away from the Mason Inn, my anger wasn't soothed. The satisfaction of confronting Eric was overshadowed by a nagging feeling that I was missing something. Emily's tears, her shaky explanations, they didn't add up. And Eric's cowardly excuses only poured fuel on the fire. When I arrived home, Emily was pacing the living room, her face streaked with tears. The moment I stepped through the door, she rushed toward me. Jake, she started, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Please, let's talk. I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. Save it, I said flatly. You've done enough damage for one lifetime. She froze, her expression crumbling. What did you do? I confronted him, I said simply. Eric's packing his things and leaving town. You'll never see him again. Her face went pale. Jake, you didn't. I didn't kill him, if that's what you're worried about, I snapped. Though he deserved it. She let out a shaky breath, but her relief only stoked my anger. You care more about him than what you've done to us, don't you? I asked, my voice sharp and accusing. No, she cried, shaking her head violently. I care about you, Jake. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to fix it. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and unfamiliar. Fix it? You think this is something you can just fix? Please, she begged, her voice trembling with desperation. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance. I stared at her, torn between the urge to throw her out and the need to get to the bottom of it all. Finally, I made my decision. You want a chance? I asked, my voice cold. Fine. Start by telling me the truth. I already have, she insisted, tears streaming down her face. No, I said firmly. You've told me what you think I want to hear. Now, I want the whole truth, Emily. Every single thing. She hesitated, her lip trembling as she stared at the floor. Jake, Now, I demanded. Her shoulders slumped, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. It wasn't just Eric, she admitted finally, her voice muffled. The room seemed to spin around me. I had expected lies, maybe some half-truths. But this? This was something else entirely. How many? I asked, my voice calm, though it carried an edge sharp enough to cut. 2 others, she whispered, barely audible. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped me. 2. My God, Emily, was our entire marriage some kind of joke to you? No, she sobbed, looking up at me with tear-streaked, red-rimmed eyes. I swear it wasn't. I don't even know why I did it. I felt lost, empty. It wasn't about you, it was about me. And that's supposed to make it better. I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. She shook her head, her sobs shaking her entire body. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry. The next morning, I called Daniel again. I need you to dig deeper, I said. There's more to this than just Eric and the others. Are you sure you want to keep going down this road? Daniel asked cautiously. I don't have a choice, I replied firmly. I need to know the full extent of her lies. Daniel sighed. All right. Give me a couple of days. 2 days later, Daniel called me back. Jake, we need to talk. This is something you need to hear in person, he said, his tone heavy. When I arrived at his office, he had a file waiting for me, thicker than the first one. This is worse than I thought, Daniel said, sliding the folder across the desk. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for what I was about to see. The first few pages were photos, Emily with Eric, with a second man, and with a third. My stomach twisted with every image, each more damning than the last. But it didn't stop there. The file contained text messages, emails, and even receipts for secret hotel rendezvous. Then, at the bottom of the pile, I found something that froze me in place, a bank statement. What's this? I asked, my voice tight, my hands trembling. Emily's been siphoning money from your joint account, Daniel explained. It looks like she's been using it to fund one of the guys she's seeing, paying his rent, buying him gifts. We traced the transactions to an account under his name. She's been using my money to support him? I asked, my voice rising as the anger built. Daniel nodded grimly. And who is he? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Daniel hesitated. His name is Tyler. Tyler? I repeated, the name unfamiliar. He's 24, Daniel continued. A bartender. Emily's been seeing him for nearly a year. The words hit me like a freight train. A year. An entire year of lies and deceit. What do you want to do, Jake? Daniel asked gently. I clenched my fists, my anger threatening to consume me. I want to burn her world to the ground, I said, my voice low and dangerous. But I knew I had to be strategic. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about making sure Emily's betrayal had lasting consequences. And with the evidence I had now, I was ready to unleash the next phase of my plan. That night, I sat in my car outside the house, the folder Daniel had handed me resting on the passenger seat. The weight of Emily's betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. The bank statement was the final insult. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had stolen from me, used money meant for our life together to fund her twisted fantasies. But tonight, it was her turn to feel betrayed. I stepped inside the house, the silence unnervingly heavy. Emily was sitting at the dining table, her face pale and drawn. The moment she saw me, she stood, her eyes wide with apprehension. "Jake," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I've been waiting for you. Can we talk?" "Talk?" I repeated, dropping the folder onto the table. "Sure, Emily. Let's talk." Her gaze flickered to the folder, her hands fidgeting nervously. "What's that?" "Evidence," I said, sitting down across from her. "Do you want to see what your lies look like on paper?" She didn't answer, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. I flipped open the folder, sliding the first few pages across the table. Photos. Receipts. Bank statements. Her hand flew to her mouth as she gasped, her face crumpling in despair. "Jake, I can explain," she stammered, her voice cracking. "Explain." I snapped, my fury finally spilling over. "Explain how you drained money from our account to support some bartender half your age. Or how you lied to my face while playing house with 3 different men." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "I was lost," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wasn't thinking straight." "You weren't thinking straight for an entire year." I shot back, my voice sharp and cutting. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she sobbed. "Please, Jake. I'll do anything to make this right." I leaned back in my chair, studying her with a cold detachment. "Anything?" I asked, my voice void of emotion. "Yes," she said, desperation dripping from her words. "I'll do whatever it takes." For a moment, I let her cling to the illusion that there was still hope. Then, I pulled the final piece from my folder and slid it across the table, a copy of her resignation letter. "What's this?" she asked, her hands trembling as she picked it up. "It's your resignation," I said evenly. "I've already spoken to your boss. He agreed that your behavior isn't exactly great for the company's image, especially considering your relationship with one of your subordinates." Her eyes widened in horror. You got me fired." "No, Emily," I said, my voice icy. "You got yourself fired." As her sobs filled the room, I stood and walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water. The sound of her hesitant footsteps followed me. "Jake, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "We can fix this. I love you." I turned to face her, my expression hard. "You don't love me, Emily. You love the idea of me being your safety net while you live out your fantasies. But that ends now." Her face crumpled, and for a fleeting second, I almost felt pity. Almost. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, frowning at the unfamiliar number. "Hello?" I answered. "Is this Jacob Harris?" A voice asked, low and serious. "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is Detective Harris with the County Police Department," the voice said. "I'm calling regarding your wife, Emily." My stomach dropped. "What about her?" "She's been the victim of identity fraud," he continued. "A significant amount of money has been transferred from her personal account over the past year." I blinked, struggling to process what he was saying. "What are you talking about?" Emily's the one who took money from me, not the other way around. Actually, Mr. Harris, the money in question was transferred into an account under your name, the detective said. We've traced it back to you. My grip on the phone tightened. That's impossible. Emily filed a report earlier this week, he said calmly. We'll need you to come down to the station for questioning. I hung up without another word, my mind racing. Emily was watching me, her tears momentarily forgotten. Who was that? She asked cautiously. A detective, I said, my voice tight. Her brow furrowed in confusion. Why would a detective be calling you? Apparently, I said, my tone dripping with ice, someone filed a report accusing me of stealing from them. Her eyes widened, and she took an instinctive step back. Jake, I didn't. Didn't you? I snapped, stepping closer. After everything you've done, you expect me to believe that? She shook her head frantically. I swear, Jake, I didn't report you. I wouldn't. Then how does a detective know about an account in my name? I demanded, my voice rising. Her lips trembled as she looked away. I don't know, she whispered. I stared at her, the weight of her lies threatening to crush me. You know what? It doesn't matter. If this is your way of trying to screw me over, it won't work. It's not me, she cried. Jake, you have to believe me. But I didn't. Not anymore. I grabbed my jacket and left the house, her sobs echoing behind me. The twists and turns of her betrayal had left me reeling, but one thing was clear, this wasn't just about infidelity anymore. Someone was orchestrating something far bigger, and I wasn't going to let them win. As I drove aimlessly through the darkened streets, the detective's words haunted me. Emily's betrayal had been bad enough. Now I was caught in a labyrinth of lies that seemed to stretch far beyond her. Eventually, I found myself outside Daniel's office. I knocked loudly until he opened the door, rubbing his eyes and still in his pajamas. Jake. What's going on? It's late. I need you to pull up everything you have on Emily again, I said, barging past him. There's something we missed. Daniel frowned but didn't argue. Daniel pulled up his files, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he started scrolling through the records. What exactly are we looking for? He asked, his voice calm but focused. Anything tying her to financial transactions in my name, I replied, leaning over his shoulder. After a few tense minutes, Daniel froze. Wait, look at this, he said, pointing to the screen. It was a record of bank transfers from Emily's personal account. The recipient wasn't one of her lovers, it was an offshore account linked to my name. What the hell? I muttered, moving closer to get a better look. There's more, Daniel said, clicking through a series of emails Emily had sent from a private account. Each message detailed plans to discreetly move money and cover her tracks. Then, Daniel opened the most damning email of all, and my blood ran cold. Everything is in place. By the time Jake realizes what's happened, the money will be untraceable. He'll take the fall, and I'll walk away clean. The recipient? Eric. A bitter laugh escaped me, even as rage boiled beneath the surface. She wasn't just cheating, I said, shaking my head. She was framing me. Daniel leaned back in his chair, stunned. Jake, this is next-level betrayal. Are you sure she's capable of something like this? Daniel, she drained money from our accounts for years and lied to my face every single day. Of course, she's capable. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I returned home. Emily was at the dining table, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen. She clutched a mug of coffee, her fingers trembling slightly. When she saw me, a flicker of hope appeared in her gaze. Jake, she began, her voice shaky. I'm glad you're back. Can we save it? I cut her off, tossing a stack of printed emails onto the table. Care to explain these? Her eyes darted to the papers, and all the color drained from her face. Where did you get these? She stammered. Does it matter? I asked coldly. What matters is that I know everything now. The offshore account, the emails, your little plan to pin this all on me. It's over, Emily. Her hands trembled as she reached for the papers, her voice barely a whisper. Jake, I didn't. Don't you dare lie to me, I snapped, slamming my fist onto the table. You were going to destroy me, weren't you? Take everything and leave me with nothing. Tears started streaming down her face, but they no longer stirred even a trace of sympathy in me. It wasn't like that, she whispered. Then what was it? I demanded, my voice rising. She looked away, her voice cracking as she finally admitted, I was scared. Scared of what? I asked, my anger boiling over. Of being stuck, she admitted, her gaze fixed on the floor. Of losing control. Eric, he promised me freedom. He said I deserved more. That you were holding me back. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the tense silence. Freedom? From what? A stable life? A husband who loved you? She didn't answer, her silence saying more than words ever could. Here's what's going to happen, I said, leaning closer, my voice cold and deliberate. I've already handed everything to my lawyer. The divorce is moving forward, and I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. You're going to explain your little financial scheme to the authorities and clear my name. If you don't, I'll make sure Eric goes down with you. Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. Jake, please. This isn't a negotiation, I interrupted sharply. It's your only option. 2 weeks later, Emily signed the divorce papers and confessed everything to the authorities. Her scheme unraveled quickly, and Eric was arrested for his role in the fraud. The judge granted me full custody of our assets, and I walked away from the marriage with my name cleared and my dignity intact. As for Emily, she packed up and left the house, disappearing into obscurity. Her reputation was in ruins. I heard through the grapevine that she tried reaching out to old friends for support, but no one wanted to associate with her anymore. Months passed. The wounds Emily had inflicted began to heal, little by little. I moved into a new apartment, started therapy, and focused on rebuilding my life. The pain of her betrayal lingered, but it no longer consumed me. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Hey, just wanted to let you know Eric took a plea deal. He's facing 10 years. Justice served. A small smile tugged at my lips as a sense of closure washed over me. Emily and Eric had thought they could destroy me, but they underestimated one thing, my resilience. In the end, I didn't just survive their betrayal, I thrived in spite of it. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all.